So there have been rumors for a Switch revision for, I want to say, at least the last year. I would say it's been a little bit of time now, and I think it really kicked off and started to have some actual tangibility when the Wall Street Journal actually reported that they had heard from manufacturers and people, I guess, just on the product lines, that there was some actual stuff going on in the background, specifically around a Switch that would need a different screen. They managed to get in contact with different suppliers and found that there was something changing with the Switch, but they just pretty much would talk about the screen being different, and that's why the thought of something like a Switch Mini really started to come into focus. Now, some people before that were saying, oh, I mean, I could see that being the revision that they would inevitably do, since, of course, Nintendo is known to do revisions with their handhelds, and the Switch is, of course, part handheld, part home console with the hybrid concept that has become so popular. So it's not surprising now to see another very reputable outlet kind of throw their hat in the ring and say, yes, it looks like Nintendo is planning what appears to be a Nintendo Switch Mini, or just a smaller Switch. And it's not surprising to see this, but to kind of go over it and figure out what they could do is where some people might get a little surprised and there might be some disagreement on it. So I do encourage people to talk a bit about what you think they could do with a Switch Mini, but let me go over some of the stuff that's kind of been shared, and we can talk a bit about that. There's also apparently some sort of change coming to Nintendo Switch Online, whether it is additions to it, like we've seen the Super Nintendo games getting thrown around, or some way that they would change up the services and make them, as they say, for more gaming enthusiasts. So let's start with the breaking news, as you see here from Japanese Nintendo, which is that Nikkei, I think it's Nikkei or Nikkei, I'm just going to say Nikkei, reports that Nintendo is planning a smaller Switch, and they're saying it'll be released sometime in the fiscal year of 2019. Despite us being in 2019 right now, we're still technically in fiscal year 2018. That'll end at the end of March, which means that, of course, you can even see it here written, fiscal year 2019 is from April 1st to March 31st of 2020. So somewhere in there, if I had to take a guess, it would be just before the holidays. So possibly this year in September or October, just to get the stock in stores and then restock again before December. And there's a couple reasons why they would be doing this and not a Switch Pro first, which is what a lot of people were hoping for, thinking about. I do think the quote-unquote Pro will happen at some point, but I think the Switch Mini makes sense to get out first, mostly because of what has happened in this fiscal year. We talked about it earlier today, where they had to kind of shrink or lower their expectations and their projections from 20 million to 17 million. Keep in mind, that is all for units sold. The reason the 3DS still works and still sells is because there are very cheap models, right, where you can get one for $80. Guess what? That $80 2DS is still a unit sold, just like how a new 3DS XL, which is like, what, $190, sometimes $200, also counts for one. And you can kind of see where the advantage is. If an $80 unit, right, you sell two of those, it's still less than that one unit for the $190. And that's how you increase sales from a hardware number perspective. You got to make it cheaper. And right now, the cheapest Switch that's brand new, that's available worldwide, they do have some weird SKUs in Japan, it's $300. They got to get it lower than that, but they have talked about not doing a price cut on it. So how do they do that? They introduce a cheaper Switch, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Nintendo Everything also did their own translation of it, and they appear to have had several translators look at it just to make sure they had everything correct, and that has more so to do with the new Nintendo Switch Online program that we'll also talk about here. But they said, if you go down here, here is the report from Nikkei, and the Nikkei one, I believe you have to pay for it or something because they didn't have the whole thing there, but they're saying they're taking measures as for what is to come, one of those being a smaller version of the Switch. The company said that they couldn't comment on their plans for the product. Obviously, Nintendo, Nintendo's not ready to announce it, so they're not going to tell you they're doing it. We've been over this a bunch of times, right? It's nothing new. But has informed multiple suppliers and game development companies that they intend to release them as soon or as early as 2019. According to their affiliates, they are miniaturizing the console with portability and playing outdoors in mind, as well as cutting features to reduce the price and expand the user base. And then they go on to talk about the Switch monthly online service. We'll talk about that in a second. I do think the outdoors thing is interesting. I don't really know if that would be, I guess that would have to do with the screen, so it's easier to see outside. So maybe it's for like a brighter screen than what they have now. Maybe one that would reduce glare. There's a couple things they could do there. They could also maybe work to make the Switch even more so to be like durable outside. So if you drop it, it's not going to like break it or anything. I mean, the Switch now is fairly durable, but the one thing that a lot of people run into is that if they drop it, their Joy-Con controllers can become loose on the railings, right? But let's go into this a little bit here, because they say they'd cut features to reduce price and, of course, expand the user base. Cheaper system means more people are likely to buy it on an impulse buy. That's why the PlayStation 4 base and the Xbox One base still sell better than the Pro and the X. Despite technically the Pro and the X being a better product, it's not a cheaper product. And that's kind of where it comes down to. So what would they do? Well, this is going to be an odd thing to say, and some people are probably, it's going to be controversial with some people, but Nintendo has done things like take the 3D out of the 3DS, which was its core like functioning and gimmick that they released it with. They might just opt to not have removable Joy-Con controllers on this Switch Mini, and there's a few reasons for that. Number one, well, if you look at the Joy-Con that's attached to the Switch, that judges its height, because it's not like you're going to shrink the Switch down and then all of a sudden have the Joy-Con controllers hanging off of either side. So they would probably remove that, which would remove some cost, and then they would basically attach it and it would look like maybe like a Vita almost. I mean, if you really think about it, it would be close. What would be really cool about that is they could probably even move around some of the joysticks, for example, and this actually might end up being a more comfortable handheld system. There might be people who already have a Switch that might buy one of these as well, just because the button layout and configuration might be better. Keep in mind, because these would not be removable, they could also do something like put a traditional D-pad on this thing. I mean, really, they could make this a very, very good handheld system. I also want to point out that just because it is a Switch Mini or a handheld device doesn't mean that it cannot dock. And I think they'll still make it so it can connect to a TV. But you also have to realize that there are some games that need a Joy-Con. Think of Super Mario Party. But the interesting thing about Super Mario Party, one, it doesn't work in handheld mode. They've described that. It works in tabletop mode. And they already sell a bundle that comes with Joy-Con controllers. And I would still assume that these Joy-Con controllers, as well as a Pro controller and anything else they come out with, would still sync to that Switch Mini. So doing a Switch Mini without detachable Joy-Con controllers that can release at $199.9 would heavily increase their user base, which would in turn, of course, probably attract more third parties and make investors happy, and of course make sales better, which again makes investors happy and makes third-party companies think more and more about developing games that are specific to that system, which would of course make the just the games themselves work better, run better, look better, and function better. So that is something to look forward to there. And I'm not surprised that they would be doing this. And the biggest reason I say that is because the 3DS is struggling right now. Look, it's going into its 8th year. It's not doing great. And something else I've learned is if you challenge Daniel Ahmed on Twitter, he will drop a graph on you. and that's what he does. He's good. You should follow him. He does some interesting stuff in the game industry and tracking. He makes a lot of graphs. He's very good at that. But don't challenge him when it comes to it. And he is part of, if you look on his profile, he is Nikkei partners, but he'll still throw his hat in the ring with different charts and everything. So, for example, here's the 3DS's share of total revenue, and you can see it has been dropping heavily, right? I mean, that's the thing. When the Switch was announced and it's coming out and there's a better handheld, people stopped buying the 3DS in droves. I think the lower price point has helped, but if you go down here even further, and you can see this is total platform revenue. You can see even that has dropped. So this is obviously fiscal year 2016, 2017, and look at 2018. It has done nothing but drop. Here's the holiday. right? Fiscal year is a holiday and then a holiday. So you can kind of see how it has been dropping heavily, and Nintendo has probably had to think about that, and they know that the pricing needs to get better on the Switch, and that's how you sell units. That, believe it or not, is how fiscal year 2019 would probably get to 20 million units. They would increase over the 17 or so that they're planning to sell now. So they wouldn't have to go through this again. And then when they have their mini out there and it's on sale and it's working for them, then they can look into the Pro. It wouldn't make sense from a business standpoint to introduce the more expensive product if you can get the cheaper product out first. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it. And of course, the Pro is still obviously a theoretical thing at this point. It's not actually out there. So again, just more speculation on that. I think the Mini is much more likely to come out first and probably will. I mean, we're hearing more and more talk about it. Well, now let me go back here and quickly talk about this. Switch's monthly online service launched 2018, and the company plans to launch a new service aimed at game enthusiasts willing to pay more sometime in 2019. This is a weird thing to say, mostly because the service they offer now could be better for the price, and we're just talking basic features. I'll admit this, I do like that they are at least talking about making the online service better, but I kind of look at this and say, okay, if I've talked about this before with tiered services, I don't see how they can add more and more games on top of games with the NES ones that they offer now for $20 a year. I just don't know how they can do that with the way Nintendo values their IP. This is the company that obviously gets New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe and brings it over and makes it $60, make Tropical Freeze $60. They value their IPs highly, and to be fair, they sell. So I don't know why they would start devaluing their games now with the online subscription service. I think they want more money for the games that they'd bring over. I don't think it's a good idea to do things like, let's just say, native voice chat, for example, a full messaging suite, all this stuff, and then charge more for those. I think all of that should be a part of the $20 service, and then this should turn into a tiered thing for their Netflix for game stuff. That is what that should be. They should absolutely not turn it into a whole thing where you need to pay more money to get features that should be there in the first place and were there back on the original Xbox in, 2003 or so, 2004, whenever I was playing Halo 2. So, interesting stuff nonetheless, but let me know what you guys think about the Switch Mini. And is that the way to go? Do you think it would be weird to have the Switch come out and all of a sudden not have removable Joy-Con controllers, because all of a sudden, I guess, the idea of the Switch becomes a bit more personal rather than being a more co-op and I guess just a community experience. But let me know what you think about all of that down below. I'm very curious. Thanks, guys, for watching. Make sure you like the video if you liked it. Dislike it if not. And, guys, I'll see you tomorrow morning for Newswave.